and I'll be able to answer your questions. So, yeah, that's that. And let's talk about rejection, our favorite thing ever. Okay, so listen. Here is the thing about rejection. Everyone gets really upset, and I know that there are a lot of people who have hard feelings right now because for anyone who's in burlesque, of course, Burlesque Hall of Fame notifications just went out. Most people don't get into that. It's just one of those things that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications, and there's going to be like 30 people in it. So the odds are always against you, but there are always a lot of feelings. And rejection can be really, 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 really tough. But the first thing I wanted to say is that it does absolutely happen to everybody. When I posted this talk, I was actually like, oh my gosh, it's possible that I'm going to be rejected with my talk that I am doing about rejection, which might be bad. Like maybe no one will show up, maybe nobody will be interested in it. And that didn't happen. There's a lot of people who are coming or who are going to watch it later who express interest. So that's really, really cool. But that is always a risk that you take. So the first thing that you really want to know is that rejection does happen to everyone. I have been rejected from so many burlesque festivals. So anyone who's tuned in and is like, oh yeah, I think you're awesome or I think you're a big deal. I've been rejected from countless things, including Burlesque Hall of Fame. I've had jobs that I haven't gotten. There's so many different things that happen. Like everyone has had these kinds of experiences, but it's very, very common. I've talked to people who perform burlesque who are like, you know, I applied with this act and it didn't even get in, and then I won the following year with it, like won the whole giant burlesque competition. So it is one of those things that's common, but it always feels really, really bad, and it's hard to figure out like what to do about it or how you should handle it. So I wanted to share with you my opinion. I feel like I'm kind of an expert on rejection, and I actually have okay feelings about it. Like it never feels good to be rejected. You always feel really sad about it, but I feel like I have a great approach for handling it. So I wanted to talk with you about that. I think the first thing we should just think about is like why rejection sucks. Like why is it so difficult? Because in your brain, of course, you can think like, well, yeah, 500 people applied to this thing, or like, well, of course I'm not going to get every job, or, well, yeah, of course every relationship isn't going to work out, but it always feels really bad. And I think understanding rejection and feeling a little more positive about it, the first thing we need to do is understand like why that's happening. And the thing is that you have this idea of yourself where you want to believe good things about yourself. You want to believe that you're successful and that you're smart and that you're well liked and that you're accomplished in your field and that you're all of these sort of different things that are really great. And when you get a rejection, it challenges that piece of your identity. So you think, well, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was, or maybe maybe I don't deserve good things, or maybe all that work I put in was really for nothing. And then you've got, of course, the mainstream media here saying, well, you need to buy these 74,000 different things in order to be good enough. So you're getting a lot of messages that tell you that you're not really good enough and that you don't really deserve good things. And that's not what you want to believe. You want to believe that you're this person who deserves great stuff and who's at the top of their game. But when you get a rejection, it feels like everything that you thought might be true, that you were afraid might be true, is real. And what's really, really important to understand here is that that rejection is one moment. It's not it's not an assessment of your entire worth or your entire being, but it is our tendency to do that. So I've got some notes here, so I'm going to look back and forth a little bit. Thanks for being here. I'm so excited. I'm new-ish to the live streaming, as I'm sure you can tell. But you know what? I'll get better with time, and I'm really, really glad you're here with me. So I think that we have this idea that we're going to be okay and that we are going to get the things that we want, and then rejection comes in and says, no, I don't think so. It's not happening. And it's this real break for us where we have to confront like cognitive dissonance, which is holding two beliefs um, that are not compatible. So you think that you deserve this good thing, and then you get this input that maybe you're not getting that award, or you're not getting that promotion, or you're not getting into this festival or whatever that you want to be in. and then your brain has to find a way to make that make sense. And you can do that one of two ways. One of them is to think, everything, you know what, I knew it. I'm a failure. I knew it. I'm never going to accomplish anything. I'll never do anything. And to fall down this like rabbit hole, which a lot of people do, which I've done. Um, or you can say, oh, well, that was a moment. That was one thing that happened. We tend to do the first one, and that's kind of where we get into trouble, because what we often do when we fail is we use it as a stick to beat ourselves with, instead of thinking, well, everything that was good about my life and everything that was awesome about me before I had this experience, this rejection, is still true. Um, we find that instead we use it to say, aha, I knew everything is actually bad. And we seize onto those little moments. And that is definitely, a lot of people have confirmation bias where they put a lot of weight on negative things that happen and very little weight on positive things. So it might not matter that these good things happen, that like your relationship is killing it when you have this rejection in your personal life. You don't get an article into a magazine, all of a sudden it's like, yes, everything's horrible, and you forget that actually, like, you're taking great care of your health, and you've got this good relationship, and you've got a job that you like, and you've got all kinds of creative stuff you're doing. Suddenly this one thing that you didn't get becomes huge, and we can fixate on that, and we can make that our whole story if we want to. And I talk to a lot of people who do this. Like, I spend a lot of my time with beginning performers and people who are trying to start their careers, and I see a ton of people just say, like, well, this one bad thing that happened is what defines me. And that is optional. You don't actually have to do that. I know that that's very, very common, but it's not something that you have to do. And the other thing that happens a lot when people experience failure is that they just stop trying. And trying is scary. Okay, so it's a lot of work to put yourself out there. It wasn't comfortable for me to put up a live stream about failure, even though I talk about this day in and day out with students, and I know that I know what I'm talking about. It was still scary for me to stick my neck out and to say, well, I hope some people sign up for this. And it's always going to be uncomfortable to put yourself out there and to do something that might result in you facing rejection, because it is a blow to your ego, and it's a blow to your sense of self, and that just doesn't feel good. So sometimes when people experience rejection, they just say, like, oh, well, I'm not going to try anymore, that didn't feel very good. I'm just going to go inwards instead of pushing out further. And I don't want you to do any of those things. So I want to talk about different ways to think about rejection, and then I want to talk about some of the steps you can take, like before you experience rejection, immediately after, and then right at the end of, or well, not at the end, but after you've had some time to process rejection, and then you want to think a little bit more about what you should be doing. So give me just half a second here. I am going to make sure that no one is emailing me, because I have a bunch of you that signed up, and I've got less of you here. It's possible that some people just got busy, or that they decided they would watch this later, which is fine. So I'm glad that you guys who are here. And okay, that all looks great. I think I got everybody. So back to rejection. Are you ready? You feeling it? I'm going to talk about feelings. I'm going to talk about all of the exciting stuff that's happening. I've got like 3 devices open, but somehow I feel like I need more. So I don't know. All right. So things that you should do when you're dealing with rejection. The first thing I really want you to do is give yourself time to be bummed. Sometimes people just feel like they have to buck up and they have to act like it's not a big deal. I think it's like, oh, well, yeah, who really cares? I knew I wasn't going to get in, or, well, I didn't actually expect to get that job, or whatever. People don't always like to show vulnerability, and it's a little bit difficult to just really sit with your feelings. But if you can sit with that rejection and spend a little time with it and figure out what's going on with it, you're doing a couple of things. One is that you're able to like analyze it a little bit and think like, what happened here? What went wrong? Is there something I can do, or is this just like a thing that happened that I really have no control over? And the second is that you're giving yourself some time and some space to move on, because feelings are feelings, and you can't really control the feelings that you have. There's no saying like, well, I wish I'm just going to not feel that way anymore. What we feel is something that's real, and if we can acknowledge that and spend time with it and be real about what we're experiencing, sometimes we find that we have better solutions for like managing it and taking care of it. So you might not like that your ego is bruised, but it is still bruised. And I think that the way that you handle this is different for different people. Some people are going to need to like take a day and feel really sad. Um, sometimes it's like, well, I just need to like chill out tonight and zone out and not do anything. Or I need to call my partner and tell them that I need a lot of hugs and care. Or maybe, maybe I need to call my friends and say like, hey, can you tell me that I'm amazing. I just really need to believe that I'm good at this thing because, I didn't get the job and I thought I was going to get it, and I just want you to tell me that I am killer at my job because I'm having trouble believing that. And I need to hear it from you because I just heard from someone else that maybe I'm not as great at it as I thought I would be. So it might be taking time for yourself. It might be asking a friend. And when you ask your friends to support you with stuff like this, it's really important to pick the right friends. And what I mean by that is that not every person who's in your life who cares about you is always going to be the right person to ask for support in every single situation. So in the case of like these burlesque Hall of Fame acceptances to this big show that went out, uh, you might not want to ask the friend who just got in and who's really, really excited about it unless you know that you're very close and that they have the emotional intelligence to be able to support you without feeling too bad about it. Similarly, like if you have a friend that just went through a breakup and they're really struggling and you're having a little tiny fight with your boyfriend, but otherwise things are pretty good, they might not be the person who's the most capable of supporting you through that. So find the right people who can give you the like love and the attention that you need in a pretty neutral way. And often those are people who are not like totally involved in the situation. It might not be your burlesque friends. It might be someone who doesn't have that much to do with it if it's a burlesque thing. Or if it's a job thing, it might not be the friend who just got the promotion that you really wanted that you need to process that with. So be thoughtful about who you ask, but do ask some friends to spend a little bit of time supporting you and telling you that this is a moment, it will pass, and they actually think that you're amazing at what you do, and they think that you should feel that way too. That's thing number one. It's also a good idea when you're having this time to give to feel a little bit bummed about it, to name that feeling. Try to figure out what it is. I mean, this is a little bit of a therapist thing to say, but it's actually useful. Are you angry? Are you angry that you didn't get into something? Are you sad about it? Are you embarrassed? I know that for me, sometimes being embarrassed um, is like a really overriding emotion, which is a little bit weird because it seems like, well, I got rejected and embarrassed might not be the first thing that you think, but I'm like, well, I tried and then they didn't want me to do it, and now I feel embarrassed that I put myself out there and I should have known better, and maybe I should have worked harder. Maybe this was the wrong thing for me and now I just want to crawl under a rock. So figure out what that emotion is for you because it might be related to other things in your life that you really struggle with. Um, it is important when you're giving yourself your time to be bummed. I will say I would love it if you could think about whether or not you practice self-abusive behavior when you face rejection, because a ton of people do. It's really common, and if that's something that happens, I think you should try to be kind to yourself about it and practice forgiveness about it, but be aware. You don't have to drink yourself into a coma if you don't get the thing that you want, or you don't have to think really bad stuff, think bad, like call yourself names in your head. If rejection is the kind of thing that triggers self-abusive behavior or self-harm for you, that's not what I mean by feeling bummed, okay? Like, I mean taking some time and being gentle with yourself, not, lighting it all on fire because you didn't get that one piece of paper that says yes that you want. So that's the first thing. Give yourself some time to be sad. Got it? Got it? Good. Okay. Second thing, try to understand what you wanted. And this seems like a little bit of a weird thing to think because you're like, well, I didn't get it, so why am I going to spend all my time, obsessing over what I wanted out of it? And the reason that I think you should do this is because sometimes your goal with getting an achievement or getting a yes out of someone is something that can be achieved a different way. And if you can understand rejection as like a no down one path, but try to see the other paths to your goal, then you might feel a little bit better about it. One good example is like we're talking about Burlesque Hall of Fame because it's something that I know just happened for a bunch of people. Um, if you said I really want to go to Burlesque Hall of Fame because it'll give me attention on the national level and people don't really know who I am, and if I go perform on that big stage in front of everybody, then everyone will know who I am. Maybe that's something you want. Or maybe you're like, I want more bookings, so I want to get booked different places. I want to be seen as a headlining performer. Or maybe you're like, I really want to network and I want to make good contacts so that I can travel all around the country and go do burlesque gigs wherever I am. Or maybe you're like, I just want to go on vacation in Vegas and look really good and get my picture taken a lot. Those are all super different things because you can go to Vegas and have a lot of fun at Exotic World or Burlesque Hall of Fame. Sorry, they changed the name, and not be in it. Great. And if you decided, if you really, really, really wanted to meet people from different areas and build up those connections so that you can travel different places, there are a lot of festivals where that's possible. There are festivals that have people from all over the place where you can do that. Even some of the smaller ones that aren't super difficult to get into. If you are trying to be seen on a bigger stage, maybe you need to think about, like, if Burlesque Hall of Fame is the only stage that's really possible on. Because I actually don't think it is. I know some people who are very, very well known who don't perform on that stage, but the way that people talk about it in this community is like that's the really big one. There are actually tons of other huge shows that have really big followings that can get you lots of exposure and lots of interest. So think about what it is that you really, really wanted, um, and try to connect to your values around that. So, and what I mean is, do you, when you're looking at, like, I use Burlesque Hall of Fame, but if you're like, I have this business and I'm trying to sell a thing, for example, and you're like, I want to get this thing to this person, are you are you after they reject you, what was the thing about that person that made them special? Was it that it was the most money? Would it get you the most reach? Would it make, did it feel like a good partnership personality wise, where you're like, I'm really looking for someone to work with that gets me, that sees what I do? Was it that you had the same company values and you're like, they produce their stuff ethically and I really want to work with people who are ethical and I'm sad about that and these other places won't work for this reason? So if you can think about that, you're actually going to get lots of information about why it was important to you, because rejection doesn't matter too much if something isn't important to you. I mean, it's always going to bruise your ego a little bit. You're not going to feel great. But if you ask for something that's not a big deal and you don't get it, you don't spend very much time thinking about it. If you ask for something that has something that's a big deal about it, then it's worth thinking about what that big deal is and trying to figure out if you can get it another way. In the case of Exotic World, lots of people are just never going to be in it. That is the nature of the festival. And it has nothing to do with any of the people that aren't in it. It's just that there are many, many, many people trying to do it and only a few spots. So if you spend all of your time and your energy thinking about getting into this one thing that your odds are very, very low at and ignoring the reasons for wanting to do that thing, you might never, ever, ever get your bigger goals achieved. So I think it's really important to try to understand what it was that you wanted. So that's the second thing. Third thing that's really important, um, if you can figure out whether the rejection was about you or not about you, that can give you a ton of information. So um, sometimes you have rejections that are very related to you. Sometimes it's that your skill level wasn't high enough, or your costuming wasn't high production value enough, or your pitch wasn't good, or your business plan doesn't work, or there wasn't good compatibility between you and another person. There's so many reasons that are about you that you can experience rejection, but there are also tons and tons and tons of reasons that are not about you. Like, there just aren't that many slots, right? Like, or they are trying to fill a very specific thing. They really, really, really need an aerialist to do a thing because their theme is circus, and you came in with this beautiful striptease act and it's perfect, and there's like lions and tigers and bears, oh my, and you don't get cast in the striptease thing, and you're like, what the hell? But they're looking for this thing very specifically that's just not what you have on offer. Maybe they want everyone in the show to be brunettes. I don't know. Maybe it's a redheads show. Whatever. Sometimes it's not about you. You're just like, I. It doesn't feel good to get a no to something, but it's unrelated to you and anything that you can do. So things that are unrelated to you, it's really helpful if you can try to realize that. And I know people always say, well, don't take it personally. And you're like, well, it feels personal because I didn't get the thing that I wanted. But a different way to think about that is to ask yourself whether or not there are lessons and takeaways from the rejection that you can use for the future. And sometimes the answer is no. And usually the answer is no when it just didn't have very much to do with you. When it does have something to do with you, there are two things. One is that people reject you because of facts, like maybe you're difficult to be around backstage, or maybe you have a personality conflict with someone and they don't want to work with you in their cast, or your act isn't, like I said, your act isn't high enough quality, or they're really looking for high production value and like lots of innovative tricks, and your costume, you just don't have that happening yet. That's specific to you, and those are like levers that you can pull if it is your goal to be accepted for something that you have been rejected for. But there's also lots of things that are feelings or that are irrational that don't make sense. Like they remind you of, I don't know, you remind them of their ex-partner. They don't like the sound of your voice. The venue owner said he doesn't want you to work there because he doesn't like that you didn't tip the waitress that well. I don't know. I mean, tip your waitresses. But that one's actually not a good example because it is about you. There are lots of things that are not related to anything that you can change, right? If people just don't like you, they don't like you. Dita Von Teese said, you know, you can be the juiciest peach in the world, and there's always going to be someone out there who doesn't like peaches. And that is a hard fact of life that we just kind of have to get used to. There are just going to be people who don't like things about us, and there's not much we can do about it. That said, the things that you can do something about, really, really, really worth thinking through. And if you get that feedback, it is gold. Like, it's being able to take a note, even if it's delivered in a way that hurts your ego through rejection, is a really, really, really important skill for professionals and people who want to achieve a lot. So being able to say, like, okay, that feedback was wonderful. I'm going to try harder next time. Takes a lot to swallow, but it will make you better in the end. Now, sometimes you don't get that feedback, right? Sometimes it's a situation where they're like, sorry, we're not interested, and you don't get to find out why. And it's frustrating not to get that feedback from people, but they don't always owe it to you. If they have 500 people's things that they had to look at, they can't write thoughtful notes to all of them, nor is it really a thing that we can expect people to do. But you can do your own assessment of things. You can look at who was accepted. You can look at who was hired. You can look at the partners that the business you want to work with is working with that aren't you. And you might notice some common traits, right? And it might be maybe they've all been in this business for 10 years. Maybe they all went to the same school. Not much you can do about not having been at the same school or not having been doing this for 10 years. But maybe it's stuff like there's a particular style that they really like, or there's a type of music that all these performers use that I'm not experienced performing with, so maybe I'll spend some time getting to know that. Maybe everybody's friends, and you're just like, yep, I'm not part of that clique. You know, figure out what that is, because if you know that it's just not about a thing that you can change, it can be easier to let go of. If it's something that you can change, it's a great idea to spend a little bit of time with that and to try to be realistic about how you can up your game for the future. So, let me see what else I got here. So, if you can understand that, let me, hold on just 1 second. I love that you're all still here. Thanks for sitting here and listening to me talk for so long. I saw one little comment pop up there, but if anyone would like to say anything, feel free to chime in, or I'll leave a moment at the end and we can type them. and think about our ideas together. So, da 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 da. Okay, this is this is important. A lot of people use rejection as a barometer of their worth, and they think, I didn't get this thing, so I'm bad, or I didn't get this thing, so I'm never going to get anywhere with my career or with this relationship or with life or whatever. I'm a failure, and people have these stories that they tell themselves about what's wrong with them. And you're hearing those stories from a lot of different places. Like, one place that we hear them from that's really, really very common is like the media. We hear, like, well, your skin needs to be softer, or you need to be thinner, or you need to have like soft, luxurious hair and long eyelashes, and also be like an accomplished violinist or whatever, you know? So you get all these messages that like everyone else is crushing it and you're not, and that's a really, really big problem. So you have the media telling you, like, yeah, you're probably not good enough, but if you buy all this stuff, maybe you can get there. Some people get this from their parents. Some people have very critical parents that will tell them, like, I think they have high expectations, and anytime that you don't meet those expectations, they make a value judgment based on, like, your personhood. And it's a very, very common way of thinking, particularly in American culture, where you're like, oh, I didn't get like straight A stars, check marks on everything, so I'm a lesser person. And I do just want to say that, regardless of your success or failure, like, you are a human being and you do deserve love and respect. And it's very, very important to realize that you're living in a culture that makes you, that asks you to judge your worth based on your success, and that's unfair and unrealistic. And that you have the option of not judging yourself by that barometer, even though you are receiving messaging that tells you that you need to all of the time. So, when you actually have a moment of rejection, I think that people tend to think of all the horrible things it could mean about them, and you sometimes treat it like your fears have all come true, like everything that's bad about you is now real because of this one decision that was probably made pretty arbitrarily, and maybe could have been made a different way if the wind blew a different way, or on a different day, if the wind blew a different way. So one rejection doesn't have very much to do with you as a person, um, in terms of whether or not you're good or bad, but the way that you handle rejection gives you a chance to um, grow and learn some lessons and also think really good things about yourself. And what I mean by that is, when you experience rejection, you can say, instead of, I'm worthless, I knew I'd fail, I shouldn't even have done it, it was stupid for me to try, you can say, wow, I'm so resilient, or I'm so strong, or I will get through this. And even if that doesn't feel true, the fact is that you are going to get through it. You just are. Like, you will come out on the other side of it. You're going to have some days that don't feel super amazing, but you are strong and you are resilient and you will get through it. And those are things that you can choose to focus on, when you're experiencing rejection, instead of making a laundry list of everything that you think might ever be wrong with you and then deciding that that's true. So that's good. And you can also really use rejection as a chance to affirm your own worth. And what I mean by that is that uh, it's hard to believe that your work has value. There's so many people and there's so many ideas, and we're so often told that we're wrong and that we're not good enough. It's hard to believe that what you do is important. And when you face rejection, it can feel like what you're doing is not important. And you can take that moment to say, like, I really know my worth. And I believe that my story is worth telling. And I believe that my creative thoughts are good. And I believe that what I have to share with the world has value, even if in this one case I was not able to share it and have it received. Because the goodness of what you share is unrelated to people's willingness to receive it. Okay, I'm going to say that one more time. The goodness of what you share is unrelated to people's willingness to receive it. So you can do something really, really wonderful, and maybe the other person doesn't like it, or can't take it in for reasons of their own, or for reasons that have to do with you. But that doesn't make the work that you're doing worse. The act that you submitted to a show that you thought was wonderful isn't less wonderful because it wasn't accepted in that show. It's the same thing. So I think sometimes we do this brain math where a rejection changes the value of something, and you have the option to say it doesn't actually. You have the option to say, you know what, I know these people didn't take it, or didn't like it, or didn't get it, or whatever, but I still think that this thing is as good as I thought it was uh, before I put it up for a situation that it could be rejected in. If no one had bothered to come to this talk, I would still think that I had things about to say about rejection that were valuable and that were important. But I would have to think that to myself actively, because if no one had bothered to come or sign up, or say I'm going to sign up and watch it later, I would have thought maybe people don't really think I'm an expert, or maybe people don't think I know what I'm talking about, or maybe people will think that I'm a joke, and that it's silly that I would dare to try to charge people for my advice. And if I wanted to, I could go way down that rabbit hole. And those are thoughts that I have, of course, because everyone has insecurities. But what I would try to do is think, like, I had a lot of really good things to say, and I'm sad that I wasn't able to share them with people. And in the future, maybe I want to take these steps to get into a place where more people are able to receive it from me. And that's okay. Um, okay, cool. I think the last thing is that, yes, this is one of my last things here. Cool. I've been talking for a little while. I'll let you guys talk in a minute. Um, if you can try to normalize rejection in your own brain, it will make your life easier. Because here's the thing. Everyone experiences it. It's not a thing you can avoid. There is no world where you can avoid rejection. Um, People who, I teach a class called Why Don't You Book Me? And I've had people that I know are considered like worldwide high class bookings. Like, no one would dare ask them to perform in their teeny tiny little piddling show, that have said to me, yeah, maybe I should take that class because I can't get a booking to save my life. And I'm like, you? And they're like, yeah, it's like nobody wants to hire me. And I'm like, everyone's terrified because you're so good. But in their heads, they're experiencing that as rejection, when most people on the other side of it are thinking like, well, I wouldn't even dare ask her. So if you can just think about the fact that rejection is a thing that's going to happen, and make a little space in your heart for that, and make a little space in your life for that, then when it happens, it's not going to make your world crash down. If sometimes people say like, oh, well, I'm a perfectionist, and I used to kind of be a perfectionist too, but it is a very hard way to live, and it's hard on you to expect something that is not possible. You're expecting something out of your life that there's no way for you to achieve. So you're just setting yourself up for a letdown day in, day out, always, always, always. Instead, you can say, like, I try my best. Or, like, I do the best I can. Or I put myself out there and I'm really, really proud because that was brave. I had someone who texted me and wanted to come, but they're like, I'm doing a comedy open mic. It's just full of rejection there. And I was like, wow, I'm so floored that you are someone who's actually like going out to tell jokes, and that there's this big chance that people are going to be like kind of shitty about it. And you're like, I'm just going to do it anyway. And that's so tough, and it's so focused on growth, and so focused on doing the work and making it good, and having a sense of humor about the fact that sometimes you just tank. Uh, that that's a really, really healthy, sane approach. Um, I think that if you are not failing, you're probably not pushing your, um, you're probably not growing, because you really have to push past your comfort level to um, to succeed and to excel at things. And if you always stay in this little tiny area where everything's safe and nobody ever says no, and you're the biggest fish in the tiny pond, and it feels good, but you're also never, ever, ever having to stretch. I mean, you can do that and you can stay in your bubble, but I don't think you're growing. So I think failure is actually a really great marker of growth and experimentation and a willingness to be better. And if you can think about your failure that way, it's kind of a mark of pride, right? It's kind of like, oh yeah, well, I failed at that thing, um, but I tried it. And so many people who have like climbed crazy mountains try it like three, four, 5 times before they get all the way up it. Like explorers go all over the place before they actually get to the place they're trying to go. There are so many people who have tried and tried and tried and eventually get to the thing. And I don't know how many times I've heard, again, just going back to Beehoff because that's what's happening right now. Like, so many people have said, I applied with that act like 8 years in a row and then it got in. And I'm like, what? But it's so strong to do that. And if it is important to you to keep on that particular goal, you just build in that rejection. You plan on it and you think, like, okay, this is a chance for me to learn some things about myself and make a little space in your life so that there is room for the rejection to fit in there. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But you have to find outer parameters by going to the outer parameters. Like if you need to know how big a room is, it's pitch black room and you need to know what size it is, you got to walk around the walls. You're going to bump into the wall. And rejection is just bumping into the wall. And you can be like, I'm not comfortable with this wall. I'd like to make this room a little bit bigger. And maybe you do some personal growth and you can change where that outer boundary is. But it's also very nice to know. It's very nice to say, like, well, okay, that's where I am. Like, this is the level I'm at, or here's the deal with this job that I really wanted and it's not happening. And just to have those facts there. So, that is some sort of general advice just to run back through that because I kind of went around in circles about it. Here's some stuff that I think you should do. I think you should give yourself some time to be bummed. I think you should try to understand what you wanted out of the rejection in the first place. What was the goal of that? And is there a different way that you can reach it? You want to try to understand that the rejection is sometimes about you and sometimes not about you. And do a little bit of assessment about things that you can change versus things that you just really have no control over. You want to try blah, blah, blah. Try to avoid using rejection as a barometer for your worth. And then five. Sorry, five. I have five on this hand, right? Yeah, five. Um, Try to normalize rejection and make that a part of the way that you understand the world because it's not a thing that you can avoid. Um, I have a couple of other random notes and then I want to talk about a few action items. But sometimes, sometimes a rejection um, is a last chance, and this is sometimes a little bit of a different situation for dealing with rejection than what I was just talking about because if you only have one chance to do something and now you've had this rejection and you it means that that opportunity is over for you. um, I think it's important to create some real space for grieving. So in that first moment when I said like take a minute and be bummed, I'm really sad about it. um, Actually, you need to think about that like something that you have to say goodbye to. So it might be a thing where maybe you're a writer and you thought that you were going to be on the 30 under 30 list, and then you turned 30 and you're past the deadline and you can't be on that anymore, and that was always one of your goals in your lifetime, and you feel really sad about it. um, you're going to have to say goodbye to that idea, and then you are going to have to go back and, same thing as I said before, you're going to want to figure out what it was that you wanted. Why was that important to you? Is there a way for you to understand that now that you have new circumstances? Is there a way for you to keep going towards the same goals and the same values, but let that specific thing that you wanted that you didn't achieve go? Um, that's the first thing. And then the second sort of stray note is that I just wanted to say that rejection in a lot of circumstances is like fine and normal and healthy, but there's also like rejection that's abusive, and I just want to make sure that I'm just noting that difference for just a second, because if you have like a partner who ignores you or who rejects you when you don't do what they want, that can be a sign of manipulation. That can be a sign of like um, something that's not so good. Or if you have people who reject you in a way that is like cruel and unnecessarily mean, that's also not okay. And I think that you want to look at rejection and for the most part think like, okay, this is a thing that happened, it's okay, but also be able to understand like behaviors that devalue you or behaviors that are actively done with the intent of diminishing your self-worth, or that are rejections that are intended to manipulate you into a certain course of action, because some rejections are one of those things, and I generally qualify all of that as like abusive behavior that I don't think we should tolerate. So I just wanted to say, while we're talking about rejection and while we're talking about dealing with it, because I know that like love rejection comes into that too, and sometimes like friendship rejections, or even work rejections, or like a burlesque professional rejection or something can be like very mean spirited. So if you pull your ego out of it and you step back a little bit and you think like, okay, that didn't feel good for these reasons, but I just want to. Sorry, I'm getting many texts up here, everyone. I forgot to turn those. I forgot to turn the texts to silent, so that's what's happening right there. But if you can just put your ego aside and realize, like, okay, um, that behavior from them was unacceptable. Separate that out from the rejection and really deal with that. So, sort of not using this advice. I just wanted to note that that's a separate thing. So, right. One more thing. So, a few more things. Some action items. So, if you are in a situation where you think you might be rejected, um, first thing you want to do is I would joke and I say like set yourself up for failure, because you are going to have things happen in ways that are predictable to you. Like if you've dealt with rejection before, you know what's going to happen. You know that you're probably going to be sad, or that you have a tendency to get really bummed out and like maybe a little bit self-abusive about something. So if you know, I'm joking, like set yourself up for failure, but be realistic about what's going to happen. If you know that you're going to get news about a job, or you know that you're going to get um, a yes or a no on something that's important to you this week, maybe try not to book yourself within an inch of your life. Try not to be super duper busy. Um, know how you want to handle it if you think that you're going to possibly experience failure. And if you're prone to like self-abusive behavior, try to think about ways that you can avoid that. It might be that you just need to like stay busy, right? It might be that you are like, okay, if I get this bad news, I'm not going to do the thing I always do. Like maybe I'm not. Maybe you pick fights with your partner when you feel like rejected and sad and you're mad. You lash out and you're like, I'm gonna just, if that happens this week, I'm just gonna try to make sure that I don't do that thing. So just make a little space where you think about like, this thing might happen, and if it happens, like, it'll be okay. Life will go on. Um, if you're prone to anxiety, I like to I like to actually I like to worst case the scenario to death. So I'm just like, okay, what is the worst thing that will happen if this goes awry and I get the rejection? What will happen? Is it um will I feel bad? Does it have long-term implications or fallouts for me? Does it, like, what will happen here? Anything? You'll probably be like, yeah, I'll feel bad for a little while. Maybe I won't get to go do that thing I really wanted to do. But the worst case scenario is usually not a calamity. Occasionally it is, mostly it's not. Um, and then the other thing you can do is best case it. So you're like, worst case, what happens? Really think through like the worst case of the scenario, and you'll often find it's not as bad as you think that it might be. Um, Next thing you can do is if you say like best case, um, think about your optimum goals. Like, this goes perfectly, I get a yes, everything goes exactly the way that I want it to, what happens? Because that's a way of setting goals for the future where you're like, okay, uh, these are the things I actually wanted out of that if it went exactly as planned. So you worst case it and best case it before you get news, and that will help you be like, these are the goals that I actually had, and if it doesn't happen, this is the worst thing that I can expect. And then, like I said, make sure that if you're someone who's prone to like handling failure very poorly, or if it's likely to trigger depression or weird behaviors from you, try to make sure that you set your circumstances up to prevent that. Um, if you do get rejection, so that was the kind of before prepping for it. If you know that you have a lot of trouble with rejection, if you do get rejected, super bummer. Oh, it sucks. This is the time to make a little space to feel bad. If you have a hot temper, you're gonna want to step away. This is also very, very key. Sometimes when people have an ego bruise, they almost like when someone people have this reflex where if someone like runs into them, they turn around and shove them back. And you're like, whoa, it was just an accident. They weren't trying to hurt you. But some people have this reflex where they lash out. If that's you, it's a very good time to step back and not get too much in the way of yourself, because you might do something that prevents you from working with those people in the future, or an action that you won't be proud of. So if you know that you have a hot temper, step back. If you know that you're someone who's prone to behavior that might harm you short or long term, try to stay busy and do whatever steps you need to do to avoid and going with those behaviors. If you do find yourself doing something that you don't feel super proud of, try to step back and be very kind to yourself and forgiving about it in the future. I know I've like not gotten a job and gone out and gotten super drunk before. Like, it happens. It's not great, but we're human and we are mostly doing the best that we can be. So um, try to do that. Take your moment to feel bad, but don't use those bad feelings to beat yourself up or make yourself feel worse. Instead, if you can be very gentle with yourself and say like, wow, I'm gonna get through this. I'm very resilient, and I don't feel good, and I just want to lay on my floor right now. But I am very resilient, and I know I'll get through this. That will make things a little easier than if you say, like, I'm the worst ever, and you go down your spiral of like self-hating talk. You can always ask for outside affirmation immediately after you have a failure. Just go say like, "Hey, listen, can you tell me I'm amazing at this? I'm not feeling good," from the appropriate friends. And then the last thing you're gonna want to do is give it a little bit of time. Unfortunately, like, the only thing that really heals feelings is time, and you're going to need that. And after you've had a bit of time, I think there are a few other things that you can do. Like I say, way after, like when your ego bruise has kind of healed and you're like, man, I'm really disappointed about that, but I'm gonna hang in there. Um, you're gonna want to assess your goals again. Think about like what you hoped for. What was it that you wanted? Is there a way for you to get it other than the initial way that you tried to get it, where you were rejected? Um, Figure out what that rejection was. Was it you? Was it someone else? Was it like you had a bad audition? Was it that that person just doesn't like you and you don't know why and you don't really think there's anything you can do about it? But you should try to assess any improvements that you could make for the future. And if you have friends that you trust that can give you feedback about that, you can say like, "Do you have any sense for what would get me better chances next time?" They might be able to tell you. Um, you should try to review any lessons that you learned. So if um, like I don't a good beef example would be like, okay, let's say you apply and you check the box that says I only want to be in the show if I'm accepted for Queen. Then you get rejected. and then you think, oh man, I really wish I'd checked that box for I'll be in any show, because I feel like the act was good, and now I wonder if I would have gotten in if I had said that I would take any booking that they wanted to give me. Well, you know, for the next time you apply, that's like a lesson that you learned about it. Or maybe someone rejected you in a way that didn't feel okay, and you're like, ooh, the reason they rejected me was really weird. Like, I've had people say to me about shows, like, well, we don't, like, no offense, but they're not really into your body type. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that wasn't what I wanted to hear, but it gives me great info that, like, that's not a venue where I can work, where I can feel, like, safe and I can feel appreciated. So I need to rethink some of my goals about wanting to work there, because now I have new information that tells me that that's not actually a smart or safe place for me to try to be. Um, and then the last thing you really want to do is just like acknowledge the strength and resilience that you just exhibited. Like, you got through to the other side of it, and it might not feel great, and maybe you're a little bit sore about it. And just as an aside, I do think it's fine to like mute people or to like unfollow people if they're posting all this stuff that kind of hurts you and it feels too raw to you. I just don't think it's the end of the world, and I think that people who do actually care about your well-being will understand. I know that for me, if someone unfollows me because they feel like what I'm posting is damaging them, I'm a million percent for that. And I think that most people who do want you to succeed and do want you to be happy and well will understand if you need to mute or unfollow them, because they're like gloating about the thing that you didn't get into or whatever. Like, that's real. So I think that if you've had that time and it's way after and your ego is a little bit less bruised, maybe it's a time to be like, okay, I don't need to mute them. I don't need to unfollow them anymore. But really to think about how you handled that rejection and think about what worked for you, and the things that made you feel better, and what you learned about yourself, and what you learned about your goals and your values, and chalk it up to something that happens to everybody, and try to look forward to new situations where hopefully there will be a little bit less rejection. But oh well, I guess you'll know how to handle it if it's there. So, okay, those are my many bazillion thoughts about rejection. I hope that they were helpful to you. If anyone has any thoughts or questions and you want to chime in, feel free to go ahead and comment. I'll give it a minute here, and yeah, let me know. What do you think? Is there anything about rejection that you have questions about, that you want to know about? Let me know. I'll give it a second, and otherwise, I'll say some goodbyes. But I'm really, really glad that you came. I hope this was helpful to you. And if you want to post anything in the comments, you can also do that. See. Are you watching? Oh, I see. Anirud, you said hi. Hey, how's it going? Hi, good to see you. I'm glad that you're here. It looks like somebody just joined us. All right. Perfect. Okay, cool. Well, that's good. Listen, I will check the comments if anyone has any thoughts or wants to share anything else with me. That's cool. And yeah, I hope you guys had a good time. I did too. And I will talk to you all soon. All right. Oh, thank you, Anna Reid. All right. Bye, everybody.